Hello everyone, today's video will be, as you see in the title, a review and general guide for every ego in the hit video game Limbus company. Or at least just for Yiseng here. It'll be a pretty simple review, just me showing the numbers of the ego and the ego's ability and passive on screen, explaining how everything works, and giving a possible use for each ego as well, if they even have one. There are many ego in this game that just plain suck, and you can't really do anything about it other than use them for clashing, and even then, some can't clash either. There are some ego that I just think are very underrated or very overrated as well, especially like these new ones, but enough of the yapping, let's just jump into it, starting with sinner number 1. This ego is a pretty simple one. Use it when you want to debuff a boss. Its debuffs are nothing insane, but they can help if you struggle to clash, like on lower clashing teams. It's also good for the Heishao team because the team-wide haste buff, but overall the ego isn't super amazing or important. The passive on this ego is honestly pretty useless. Nerfing your own speed for 20% damage on only some skills is really niche, and you need to be hit to activate it, making it even more niche. Overall, I'd give this a solid 5, maybe 4. It's honestly a really middle-of-the-road ego. This ego's only real use is on sinking teams, but on sinking teams, it's one of the best egos to press. First of all, it will help your Yiseng clash because Spicebush Yiseng has a 9 rolling skill 1, and even with enemies at negative 45 SP, he can lose clashes. And not only does this ego help with that, it also has a passive that makes it so Yiseng gains clash power based off the enemy's sinking. But the main use for this ego is its synergy with the Manor's debuff. Echoes of the Manor, what it does, well, when you apply sinking, it will also apply sinking count with a 50% chance. And how this ego applies sinking is it will randomly inflict sinking based off your gloom resonance between the targets. And since it applies sinking in this way, each infliction of sinking will count as a separate infliction on even one enemy. So what will end up happening is you inflict way more count than you would think with this singular ego. And Spicebush Yiseng really likes count because of how Sinking Deluge works, making it so the more count and potency you have on the enemy, the bigger your huge one-shotting nuke will be. This ego is honestly a 7 out of 10 for me. It's really good. The only reason it's not higher is because how niche it is, only working on Spicebush teams really, and only working if the boss has the Manor's debuff, which it should have very often, but we never know what could happen with sinking in the future. This next ego is a real simple one. It's 10 burn potency and some AoE damage, and it's pretty mid. Doesn't really do anything other than that. And it's not even very cheap either, at 20 SP and 6 ego resources, one of which being Gluttony on the burn team, which is basically non-existent. And the passive really isn't much to write home about. It can work out well, but it's nothing really insane. The main issue with this ego is that it's a burn ego, which all burn egos are weaker because they're burn egos. Which might sound dumb at first, like why would the burn egos be bad just because they're burn? But it's because there's a very special burn ego called Magic Bullet Otis, which you want to spam on that team no matter what. I will try not to bring up this ego every single time we get to a burn ego, but it really is the reason that every burn ego in the game is weaker than the other status egos. Even super duper broken ones like Capote Merceau later on this list. When I was first making this list, writing everything down, really getting my opinions on a piece of paper before I talk about it, I gave this ego a 4 out of 10, which is absurdly high for this thing. It's honestly a 2 out of 10. It's 10 burn potency and literally nothing else. And it's a burn ego, like I said. It's not very good at all. This is another ego where there's really not much to talk about other than I really like the art. It's got some Sloth Fragility and Paralyze, and that's really it. The passive does literally nothing for probably every Yiseng, and I know I haven't talked about the corrosions very much yet. I'm only going to talk about them when they're important. I just want to point out that this corrosion takes the Sloth Fragility from 2 to 1, which means it's even just worse to press, while costing more to press in the first place. And the Sloth Fragility is same turn, so your Yiseng first of all needs to be fast, and on the one team you would want Sloth Fragility, there's not really a Yiseng used, and also there's 2 very fast IDs in Mao Faust and Thumb Capo Merceau. Overall, this ego really is just another 2 out of 10. Honestly, it's really not very good and will never be worth pressing, especially in Tremor, where you want to press some very specific egos, and this thing just gets in the way of all of that for no reason. Finally, an ego that's got some real meat on its bones. First, it will spend charge to deal more damage, and if charge is spent, it will inflict 5 Dimensional Rift. What Dimensional Rift does is it will inflict rupture count based off of its stack on turn end. It will also deal bonus pride damage based off the target's rupture, and also reduce the rupture count by 5. That 5 rupture count eaten can really hurt your stack, so watch out when you press this thing. Passive is really where this ego gets all its hype. At the start of turn, if your Yisang took no damage, it will gain 4 charge count and then inflict +1 rupture count on every coin to enemies that are slower than him. This will basically make every Yisang rupture ID rupture positive, which can be really good for maintaining that stack. This is the first ego we've reached that it's really good to use your Superbia Durante on, because on turn 1, if you use this thing, the rest of your turns will have a +1 rupture count Yisang on every coin, and ignores the -5 rupture count on use. Because on turn 1, it doesn't matter if it eats 5 count, there won't be any count anyways on use. This ego is a really good one for rupture teams, especially in the real long fights like the Refraction Railway, and is really strong on both rupture Yisangs that are used, being wayyyy and wayyyy. Honestly, this thing is just amazing. We finally reached a really good ego, and I'd give this a very good grade of 8 out of 10. This ego is truly the definition of a niche ego, but in that niche, it's one of the strongest egos. I know a lot of people see this ego and they think of Mirror Dungeon, but I'm not going to be talking about Mirror Dungeon at all in this video really, other than bringing up this ego now and maybe a few later that were designed for Mirror Dungeon. I will talk about the other use of the ego, which is Railway, but first let's actually talk about the ego itself. First of all, you gain a new status called Torn Memory based off of your Resonant. This status doesn't do anything outside of conditions on this ego itself. Then you will gain Poise based off of your Torn Memory, and then after the attack goes out, you will lose all your Torn Memory. The first coin is a little special. It only deals damage to the main target of this ego skill, even though the skill itself has 7 attack weight. And if the target is an ally, you will deal increased damage for every Torn Memory on Yisang. On ally kill, you will apply 3 poise to self, and 2 random allies gain ego resources of the ally's skill 1, and if you fail to kill your ally, you will gain 3 poise on self. Second coin will only deal damage to the sub-targets, but if you failed to kill your ally on the first coin, it will only target 1 random sub-target, and will deal increased damage for every Torn Memory, while inflicting 3 bleed potency on crit. And the passive of this ego will simply give 2 poise count when you kill something. Now I know there is an ID specifically made for this ego, but there actually is a better user of this ego, which is surprisingly Spicebush Yisang. The main niche I found for this ego is on side 2 of Railway, where you use Spicebush Yisang and his increasing AoE damage passive to completely blitz through those first 2 segments, where it's all the Envy Pecatillum. But this ego does really rely hard on having under-leveled IDs or level 1 IDs that are weak to pierce to actually be able to kill consistently to get the full damage out of this ego, making it really gimmicky overall. If you can fulfill the gimmick, of course it does a stupid amount of damage, especially in AoE encounters. But there's many moments where the setup for this thing isn't really worth it, especially with WoW egos more recently being just big AoE damage nukes. I will say this ego obviously isn't bad, it does do a lot of AoE damage, but overall it really won't see any use outside of Mirror Dungeon speedruns. And in the niche it has in Railway, there are just better egos now for massive AoE damage. I'll give this thing a 5 out of 10. I think it's still good. obviously, but I don't think it's anything that you need. Even with the ID, it's nothing crazy. This ego is the technical first WoW ego, being a pretty simple one because of giving a solid 1 sloth power up, 2 sloth damage up, and 3 protection to all allies next turn, as well as 15 SP on heads hit, which can really help out the 35 SP need for this ego. And the passive is a real simple one as well, a simple start of turn SP heal for all your allies. Honestly, this ego is nothing crazy. The buffs are good if you do a lot of sloth damage, but again, in Tremor, where you want the sloth damage, it's not gonna really be used ever because you want to press more important egos. The AoE damage isn't bad though, and the protection can help out your team if you really need it. But of course, the best part of this ego is probably the passive of the very consistent SP heal. Obviously, it can be bad on some negative coin IDs, but obviously that's every SP heal, and this one is still really good. My only real issue with this ego is the SP cost of 35. Even if it's refunded to you, it's only on heads hit where it's refunded, making this thing just inconsistent when it shouldn't need to be. I'd really give this thing a 5 out of 10, maybe lower if you don't need the SP, but it still is a good AoE ego and can buff you, so it's obviously not bad. It is a little expensive though, so it's not always something you can press, but in those longer fights it can be good with that SP heal, especially when you want to press a lot of egos. I'm not going to talk about this ego like I did the other ones. I'm going to really drill into this ego and how awful I think it is. It is one of the worst WoW egos they've ever made, and this same company made the Sign of Roses Gregor, so. The first issue with this thing is it is a 4 coin ego that costs 30 SP when you use it. So those 4 coins have a great chance to not flip heads and ruin your damage. If this was a normal 10 SP WoW that took SP out every other turn, then it would be way better just off of that. But that right there really hurts the ego instantly. But if we just start with going over the ego, you get coin power based off the target's burn and sinking, and you gain poise based off resonance. That's all normal, that's fine. Even if it's 3 statuses, that's okay. It could still work out. And on the first coin, it's 2 burn and 3 sinking count. So this thing is only -1 sinking then. That's pretty good as well. But then we get to a real issue. On the second coin, you inflict this thing called Shattered World, this turn and next turn. This debuff sucks. It makes the enemy take 20% more burn damage, but it's only normal burn. It does not make the enemy take more dark burn damage, which is awful. And the other thing this ego does is make the enemy take more Gloom and Wrath damage, but only from Yi Seng's base skills, so it can't even increase the damage of this ego itself. While for some reason limiting the ego's damage boost even more to only Gloom and Wrath. Which, by the way, the sinking Yi Seng and the burn Yi Seng that would want to use this thing, main damage skill is not Gloom and Wrath. Then on the third coin, it'll inflict burn based off sinking on target at a maximum of 5 burn and 1 more burn count. And then it will activate burn 1 time, reducing the burn count by 1. This thing is basically made for Mirror Dungeon and how its double statuses work. It is entirely there just so it can do big damage in Mirror Dungeon. If we get a Ryan Yi Seng that can use this thing, I doubt he will even want to with how weak this ego is. But if we go to the passive now, if the target has Shattered World, you inflict 1 more burn potency and sinking potency with the unit's base skills, up to 8. The issue with this passive is it's only when the enemy has Shattered World, so it's only going to matter for 2 turns, unless you want to press this awful ego again. And for the other part of the passive, for every enemy killed due to burn damage, gain a damage up next turn for a random attack type, which adds even more awfulness to this ego and randomness you don't even need. The only real use I can find for this ego is the one burn activation, and then again, it's a burn ego, which instantly makes it awful because of Magic Bullet Otis. So not only is this thing a burn ego, it's also an ego that has 4 coins, nukes your SP, and also has useless debuffs. There is quite literally no reason to press this thing right now. The only reason I will give it a 3 out of 10 is because it has AoE WoB damage, and there is a slight, and I mean very slight, possibility that an ID can save this thing. And here's a tier list. Since I know everyone loves tier list, I've made one so far for the egos that I've reviewed, and I'm going to continue this for each center. I'm going to add them to this tier list, and at the end of the series, it'll be a big tier list showing off every ego and where they rank. Thank you for coming by and watching this video all the way through, and I'm really appreciative of it. Please like, subscribe, do all that amazing stuff for me, please, because it would be awesome and I'd like it a lot. Thank you. See ya.